This morning is the Rainbow Connection. It is strategies to foster belonging for LGBTQIA plus youth with Backpack Healthcare. And our presenters today are Jody Rohr and Maddie Dominiski. A little bit about this session is one of the most important ways we can support LGBTQIA plus youth is by ensuring they have access to inclusive, affirming, and safe environments. For parents and community members, this means creating an environment where your child feels accepted, respected, and free to express their authentic selves. So during this webinar, participants will learn more about the LGBTQIA plus community, the obstacles and risk factors that LGBTQIA plus youth face, and concrete strategies for providing love, acceptance, and a strong support network. By surrounding LGBTQIA plus youth with understanding and advocacy, we can help them thrive. Don't miss this important opportunity to learn how you can make a meaningful difference in the lives of LGBTQIA plus children and adolescents. So we thank you so much for joining us today during Pride Month for this really important webinar. So I'm gonna tell you a little bit about our speakers. Jody Rohr is a passionate licensed master social worker dedicated to making a positive impact through her work. With a BA in Peace Studies and Government from Manhattan College, she brings a unique perspective shaped by her commitment to social justice and political involvement. Her journey led her to earn an MSW from the University of Maryland, Baltimore School of Social Work in 2020, solidifying her dedication to supporting vulnerable populations. Jody's professional focus lies in working with children and adolescents, particularly those with autism spectrum disorder, through early intervention programs and special education. Her holistic approach emphasizes the importance of addressing intergenerational cycles of abuse and trauma to foster healthier family dynamics and promote child development. Jody joined Backpack Healthcare to continue working with vulnerable populations as a pediatric psychotherapist. So thank you and welcome again, Jody. And a little bit about Maddie. Maddie Dominiski is a licensed graduate professional counselor with a bachelor's degree in theater and a master's degree in clinical mental health counseling. With a passion for working with children and teens, Maddie utilizes her theatrical background to creatively engage with clients, fostering a safe and inclusive atmosphere. She is particularly passionate about supporting LGBTQIA plus youth, striving to provide empathy and understanding as they navigate their individual paths. Maddie is also a proud member of the LGBTQIA plus community and dedicated to helping community members foster a sense of advocacy and knowledge. So thank you for bringing all of that education, experience, and knowledge to this webinar. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having us. We are both really excited to be here. I have been here once before, and I thought it was just such an amazing webinar series that you guys are doing. So thank you guys so much for having us. Once again, I'm Jody. So I am a clinician at Backpack. And today, yes, we are going to talk about the Rainbow Connection and strategies to foster belonging for LGBTQIA plus youth.
And I'm Maddie. So this is my first time here. Thank you for having me. Jody very kindly pulled me in to this presentation so we can work together. So I'm really, really excited to be here, and just happy Pride Month, everybody. We're excited.
Right, happy Pride. And so once again, like Jess was saying, we really want participants to just learn more about the community, obstacles and risk factors, and then just provide some concrete strategies for providing love, acceptance, and a strong support network. And so with objectives, I'm kind of going to talk about just understanding the LGBTQIA plus identities, do a little overview, and then also talk about some of the unique needs and challenges faced. And then Maddie will take over, and she has some great information about how to provide really inclusive, affirming, and supportive environments. So to get started here, I know that probably, if not all of you guys are familiar with a lot of these terms, but I just figured why not just go through each one, go through the whole acronym. And I'm sure, even for me, some of the stuff that I ended up researching was new to me as well. So maybe some of it you won't be as familiar with. And so just starting with the L, we have lesbian. So this is typically a woman attracted to other women. But this can also include non-binary individuals. And then we have gay. I always think of this as also kind of an umbrella term because this is really just saying a person attracted to the same gender. But it's not just used by men, it's also used by women and non-binary individuals. And then we have bisexual. This is a person attracted to more than one gender. It is similar to pansexual because somebody who, is bisexual might not just be attracted to men or women. They also might be attracted to other gender identities. And so that is why we say it's kind of similar to pansexual. Pansexual is somebody who doesn't have any, I guess they are attracted to all different gender identities. So transgender, intersex. So that is kind of why both of those can sometimes be looped together. And then we have transgender, and that is a person whose gender identity expression differs from the sex assigned at birth. And this can include various sexual orientations. Queer. So this is a very inclusive term for identities and orientations outside of the mainstream. So queer is often used as a catch-all to include many people, including those who do not identify as exclusively straight and or folks who have non-binary or gender expansion identities. It's interesting because this term was actually previously used as a slur, but has been reclaimed by many parts of the LGBTQIA+ movement. And now we have questioning. So this is a person that is exploring their sexual orientation or gender identity. I do want to say, and this is just from my personal clinician experience, I work with a lot of kids and teens particularly, and I have noticed that doing my intakes now with more of the teen groups that they actually will say that they're questioning. And that to me was just very interesting. I think it's with all the different, the progress that has been happening, the different movements, I think that they don't feel as pressured now to identify within a certain gender identity. And so that's just something that I've noticed is that more of them are saying, I'm questioning, I'm not sure yet. And then we have intersex. So this is a person born with various traits and reproductive anatomy. And so there is a wide variety of differences among intersex variations. So this can include differences in genitalia, chromosomes, internal sex organs, hormone production, hormone response, or secondary sex traits. And also, I do want to say, if anybody does have questions at any point, we are going to do a Q&A at the end. But if something's really itching or if you don't want to forget, you can always put it in the chat and we can attend to that. Okay, so now the next part here, I wanted to organize this all in a little chart. I felt like it was just a lot easier to kind of understand because I do feel like it's important to address the difference between sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression. And then just kind of some key points and organize it into what, examples of what might be in that category. And so sexual orientation, this includes, an individual's enduring physical, romantic, and or emotional attraction to others. So it basically just describes who you're attracted to. This can include heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, asexual, and pansexual. And then we have gender identity. So this is an individual's deepest sense of self as male, female, a blend of both or neither, and how they perceive themselves and what they call themselves. So this really kind of describes of who you are. And this can include cisgender, transgender, non-binary, gender queer, and gender fluid. And so I will say I was familiar with gender fluid. I wasn't familiar with gender queer. So I did include, just in case anybody else is also was feeling that way, gender queer is similar to non-binary, but it's also used as an umbrella term encompassing a combination of genders. And then gender fluid is gender identity that regularly shifts over time. So a person can be both or just one or neither. And then we have gender expression. This is the outward manifestation of a person's gender identity, typically shown through their behavior, clothing, physical traits, or voice, which may align or differ from the socially defined norms and characteristics traditionally associated with masculinity or femininity. And that is kind of how you present yourself to the world. So you could be masculine, feminine, androgynous, or non-conforming. Okay, and then I did think it was important to also just acknowledge the vast diversity within the LGBTQIA plus community as a whole. So members of the community often have intersecting identities such as race, ethnicity, social economic status, and disability, which really can shape, their unique experiences and challenges. And then fluidity. Many people within the community experience fluidity even within their sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression over time. And then we have cultural regional differences. And I know this is something too Maddie will get a little bit more into when she talks, but cultural background and geographic location can also greatly influence how individuals and understand and express their identities. And then activism and advocacy. So the community encompasses diverse perspectives on activism and advocacy, with different groups prioritizing various issues, so such as legal rights, healthcare access, and social acceptance. And so that is actually something I'm going to get into a little bit with some statistics of the barriers to healthcare and the access as well, and also some of like the mental health issues that the community tends to also have higher rates of. So for example, like bullying, nearly half, and this is all I do want to say, this is all taken from the Trevor Project. They do an amazing national survey that thousands of people take across the whole United States. And so then they come up with these numbers. So I felt like it was a good source to use. And so, yeah, nearly half of the community has experienced bullying. 23% physically threatened or harmed. And then 60%, which I thought was pretty high, have felt or experienced discrimination. And so I do feel like with that one, it would be interesting to see how that varies maybe from state too. And so at the end of our presentation, we have a link to the Trevor Project. So if you were interested, you could see if maybe some of those higher numbers you might see in different states that might have, tend to have more unaccepting or unprogressive laws as versus, maybe somewhere like Maryland. So just want to point that out there. And then mental health challenges. So, 66% have, have experienced symptoms of anxiety. 53%, so about half, have experienced symptoms of depression. And then, of course, suicide, 39% said that they have considered suicide, and this was in the past year, so for 2023. And then one, which I thought was interesting, so it's 12%, but it's actually 1 in 10 is what it would equate to of youth that have actually attempted suicide. So definitely a lot there with that. And so lastly, I'm going to kind of just go through each one of these and just kind of give even just an example for each of how the importance of family, school, community support can kind of be used in each one of these categories. So impact of recent politics. So once again, I'm taking some statistics, other research from the Trevor Project and some of my own, but really, I mean, over 90% of LGBTQIA plus youth reported their well-being was negatively impacted by recent politics, leading to heightened stress and anxiety. So that is a huge number. So clearly impact that has definitely affected and has created more challenging challenges for the community. And so one of the ways that I felt like I used family. So families, they, providing open communication and reassurance about their support despite negative political climates can greatly help. So just even acknowledging that to your child. School support. So this was another stat that I took. So 54% of transgender and non-binary students who found their schools to be gender affirming reported lower rates of attempting suicide. And so one way that I thought of for schools to show support is implementing gender neutral bathrooms, including LGBTQIA plus topics in their curriculum. And then mental health care needs. So this I also thought really stood out to me. So 84% of LGBTQIA plus youth wanted mental health care, but 50% of those who wanted it were unable to access it. So that's a pretty big number. That means only 34% were actually able to access it from the numbers of people that were surveyed. But it still points out as a huge issue. And this one too, I think for me, stood out a little bit. So as we get into barriers for mental health care, because the reason for this is because when I was actually an intern in grad school, I was placed at a Catholic elementary school, and I'm Catholic myself, so I get it. But it was hard because we had some students that were, wanting counseling services because they felt they weren't treated correctly as being in the LGBTQIA plus community. And the school administration basically told us that as counselors, going against our ethics, we were not allowed to provide that advocacy, for the teachers to use they, them pronouns and things like that. So it can get really tricky. And that's the one with that one as well. I'm not saying that you shouldn't send your kids to Catholic school. I think that's why then sometimes that community access can be just so much more necessary in certain situations. So to be able to refer students to affirming places and some counseling and support like that outside of the school, if it's not given to them within the school environment. So I just thought that was an interesting point. So once again, access to affirming places. So for home, families can create affirming home environments by using preferred names and pronouns, but also just educating themselves on the issues that the community faces. Schools, they can create gay straight alliances or similar clubs to provide safe space for LGBTQIA plus students. And then even online, it's huge. So the importance of online communities and providing support and connection, and that is especially for those that are in less accepting physical environments. Okay, so I know that was a mouthful. Once again, if you have any questions, feel free. Any comments and also any insight that you have. If not, we also are going to turn it over to Maddie because she is going to get into creating those supportive environments. So kind of like going a lot more deeper into kind of what's the last slide I had just talked about.
Yeah, so thank you, Jody. So yeah, we're going to talk a little bit more about creating supportive environments and also just like what it means to actually be an ally, right? And to put that into action. I do want to just kind of put a disclaimer that some of my language as we speak is going to be sort of instructional to parents and caregivers. I want you all to know that this can apply to anyone being an ally. That was sort of my lens, but this can apply to anyone working to be a better ally. And I think this is really, really valuable information for clinicians who may be working on coaching parents, right, through this time of their kids coming out. So just wanted to kind of place that disclaimer. Overall, we're going to be talking about putting allyship into action. So Jody, you can hit the next slide whenever you're ready. So as Jody kind of started on, and this is what we're going to get a little deeper into, ways to create a supportive environment. Let's start with educating yourself, right? So today might be the first day for you, right? This might be your start. This might be way down the line, and you just want to continue to learn. Either way, I'm so happy that you all are here. It's pretty crucial to supporting the LGBTQIA community, specifically youth, because like Jody said, these things are always evolving, right? There are terms that even as an active member of the community, sometimes my teen clients make me feel very old because they'll throw out a term and I'm like, what does that mean? And so, this is where it's really our job to do a quick Google. We're very lucky that Google's free, right? And we have access to information. And I'm going to provide a ton of resources at the end of this that should be helpful as well, right? So this does not mean that you have to know and understand everything perfectly right off the bat. You don't have to fully understand something immediately in order to continue supporting your child. What I mean by that is that support should be happening at every single step of the way, right? This is true for anyone that wants to be an ally, right? This does not mean that, oh, I don't understand, but I support you, right? Let's still be doing the work. But let's not put support on pause in the name of I'm still learning, right? Beginning to take steps to educate yourself on these terms, as well as the challenges faced within the community and the rituals of joy within our community, will indicate that you want to learn and better understand the child or the adolescent in your life. And then beyond being, here and learning or just doing a quick Google, there are many, many ways to learn. So lots of places will have online like terms, glossary of terms type resources, which I find really helpful because then you can just go right on through. You can find what you're looking for. So the Human Rights Campaign has a glossary of terms. PFLAG has a glossary of terms. Hopkins has a glossary of terms. I'll link all of these at the end, but I think they're really, really helpful. Even if you think you know everything, just to have on deck and refer back to. Whenever you're ready, Jody. So, this is kind of, I think, what Jody was alluding to before, right? This idea of, what if my beliefs, I hear a lot of parents say this, what if my beliefs just completely conflict with this, right? What if I was raised Catholic and it's rooted in me that this is not recognized as a marriage, right? What are we going to do? I have had several parents say this to me, right? I want to support, but this is not aligned with my culture or my beliefs. I think it's really important to acknowledge, first of all, that Jody and I presenting today are two white women, right? And so we do not claim to know or understand every culture, and I would not venture to sort of be prescriptive about how everyone should navigate every cultural issue. However, I did some research on kind of what the overall guiding principles seem to be, even when you're struggling with that internal tension, right? Or if you're a clinician that is struggling to sort of reconcile a client and their parents' differing beliefs. So, a couple things that your actions as parents, caregivers, allies should always be rooted in. First of all, no matter what your beliefs, you can always lead with compassion and empathy, right? And we should be leading with compassion and empathy and good faith. Number two, this is not something that your child can intrinsically change about themselves. It doesn't mean things won't evolve, right? But that is very different than your child saying, this is who I am, and someone saying, no, you're not, right? So I think it's important to have a belief that this is not something they can change about themselves, nor is there anyone to blame for it, right? So I'll sometimes have parents say to me, what did I do for us to get here, right? And the answer is, first of all, nothing. And second of all, I think the idea of blame implies that someone has done something wrong, right? That some unforgivable thing has occurred or been committed. There's no one to blame for this. It's not something that can be changed. I think if we can root even our conflicting beliefs in that as we navigate this, I think it's going to be a little bit easier. And then finally, I think it's really important to remember for children and especially for preteens and teens that they are learning more about themselves. That is developmentally appropriate. That is what they're supposed to be doing at this age, right? This shows that they are becoming independent thinkers, that they are trying things. If we need to look at this from sort of a developmental perspective, this is right where they should be, right? So when we talk about this idea of, oh my gosh, my kid is just doing this for attention, or is this gonna be a phase, right? This is exactly what they're supposed to be doing. They're supposed to be learning about themselves, right? So if we can root this in a sort of human development perspective, right? This is where they're supposed to be, learning more about themselves and then claiming that. I think that'll help us navigate a little bit better. Jody, yes. And then this is just what I already mentioned. There's just other resources for learning, right? PFLAG is a resource mostly for parents and guardians, right? And just the network of people surrounding LGBTQIA community members. I love PFLAG. I think they do great work. So I would definitely look them up. The Human Rights Campaign, right? I think is always a great place to kind of be referencing how social justice plays into this, right? Are basic human needs and rights being met? And then Hopkins, I think, can kind of take the mental health medical lens. So these are all great resources as well. All right, so practice active listening. I know that sounds like common sense, but sometimes I have to remember that me nodding and then my brain going somewhere else, even though I'm nodding and smiling, is not the same as active listening. So I thought we'd do a little review of what active listening means through the lens of allyship, right? So especially with your teenagers, great strategy for active listening and better understanding them is going to be open-ended questions. If they can answer yes or no, they probably just will answer yes or no, right? So open-ended questions not only kind of invite them to share a little bit more, but they also indicate that you want to hear more, right? That you're invested. The next piece of this I feel like is really important, right? It's important, I think, it's not wrong to have questions. It's important to consider, to check in with yourself, why you are asking questions, right? Are these questions being asked in good faith? So it is extremely and entirely normal to have questions or fears or misunderstandings or even frustration when it comes to understanding your child's identity. But research from the Child Mind Institute kind of indicates that sharing every single complicated feeling you have about this with your child is a little bit too much transparency, right? And it can actually do harm, right? Totally normal to ask questions. But this is where, if you're really, really struggling with it, important to lean on your support system, right? Don't alienate yourself and think, oh, I'm not allowed to have struggles and worries, but know when to lean on your external support system, right? Attend PFLAG meetings, call friends, use resources, talk to your own therapist, right? And then to your child, if you have questions, great, make sure that they're being asked in good faith, right? And of course, always use compassionate language, right? I think it's really easy when we start going back and forth to shed that compassion layer, right? I don't think people do it on purpose all the time, but I think it's easy when we're really getting in a heated exchange or really trying to understand something to stop using person forward language or stop kind of offering a basis level of compassion. Let's make sure that we're doing that. I think these are really important things to keep in mind when it comes to active listening as an ally. Whenever you're ready to, thank you. The other thing we can do, I think, to create supportive environments as clinicians, as allies, as parents, caregivers, guardians, you can engage with your child's school or with the child's school. So that can look like a few things, right? That's looking for policies that protect members of the queer community from any type of bullying and harassment. That's also being in tune, if you're a parent or a clinician, to the signs of bullying and harassment, right? Especially for tweens and teens, they're not always going to tell you if they're being bullied, right? And so, and that could be a whole other presentation, right? But tuning into and kind of trusting your intuition on if you sense there's bullying happening, and then taking the proper measures and channels to make sure it gets addressed at school. The other piece of this is looking for curricula that shares positive representations and narratives around the LGBTQIA plus community, right? So I think that this has improved over time based on my conversations with my clients. I know that many of my kids in public school talk about Stonewall, right? And can really in detail explain to me the queer rights movement. That's really, really great. Let's keep it moving, right? Let's keep encouraging that. And beyond that, right, I want us to be encouraging curriculum that doesn't just look at pain and suffering, but also really important queer historical figures, queer joy, right? All of this is a holistic look at a history, right? That I think is really, really important. I was sharing with Jody as we were sort of putting this presentation together, how excited I always am to learn about queer historical figures, right? So, you know, Frida Kahlo, Ma Rainey, Dusty Springfield, right? Sally Ride, all historical figures that maybe you knew were queer, maybe you didn't, right? And I think that's always really exciting to be able to learn more about really successful queer people. So the other thing is, and that kind of leads us into this next part, connecting queer youth with affirming communities and role models, right? So I'll often have parents say, okay, you know, I'm on board, but I don't really share in this experience. So how do I support my child through an experience I don't entirely understand? Part of that is community support groups, right? Or even therapeutic support groups. I was just sharing that my mom works for a public library and often holds public programming to connect queer individuals with one another. Bring your child to Pride events or LGBT events. They don't just happen during Pride Month, right? Pride Month is prime time, but they happen year round. And then also exposing your child to media with positive queer representation. That's really, really, really huge. Go to the next slide. Okay, and then some best practices for allyship. So it's important to use correct names, pronouns, and terminology. I'm going to get more into that in a second. Promote representation, like we just talked about, and also on a legislative level, advocating for queer rights. So whenever you're ready, Jody. So why is it important to use correct names and pronouns and terminology? I know that for some of us, it might feel a little bit hard to keep up, right? But first of all, a couple things I kind of want to say about this. It's important to affirm a person's identity, right? That's actually crucial. It shows respect, and misgendering or dead naming somebody communicates that their identity, that them as a person, is less than others, right? That is why it's crucial. I know that sometimes it feels like, oh my gosh, where did all of this pronoun stuff come from? I know, I'm sure this is a room that already knows this, but it's important to remember everyone has pronouns. Everyone has always had pronouns, right? So my pronouns are she, her. I am cisgender. My pronouns are she, her, right? The other thing that I think is important to remember when it comes to non-binary individuals that might use they, them pronouns, right? They, them pronouns are widely accepted by the academic community as a gender-neutral singular pronoun. And using they, them pronouns to refer to a singular person is grammatically correct. The last thing I'm going to say about this that I think is important to keep in mind when it comes to, oh my gosh, how do I keep up with this? Is if you make a mistake, which you might, that's okay. But it's important to be practicing to try to reduce your mistakes, right? So that at a certain point, maybe you won't make them. And then also, if you make a mistake, if you misgender someone, if you dead name somebody, correct yourself, apologize briefly, move on. I speak not from the perspective of a trans person, but my sister is transgender. And I think something that I watch happen often is someone might misgender her. She will correct them, which requires a lot of bravery to have to do. She's not a confrontational person. And then that person will kind of belabor the point, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, right? Which is well-intentioned, but may put that individual in an uncomfortable position and puts them in a position to have to comfort you. So when it comes to correct names, pronouns, terminology, try your best to do the work. And if you mess up, apologize, correct yourself, move on. Let's go to the next slide, please, Jody. So why is representation important? So it allows children to see themselves within the stories that they engage with. It normalizes their identities and their experiences. It also educates and offers diverse perspectives to people who might not be within that community. I know that it can sort of feel like, you know, maybe we don't have a lack of representation, or maybe when we look around the world as people feel more comfortable coming out or have more language to identify themselves, it might feel like, oh, well, there's representation all around us. kids have social media and TikTok. It's still really, really crucial, right? Because we know that there are parts of the world and parts of this country that don't totally understand this community, right? And also, you might see a TikToker and you might think, well, that person has more resources than I do, lives far away from me, is in a position to come out, right? And so, especially for closeted kids, I think being able to see themselves in TV, movies, books is still really, really important. Even in 2024, we really, really, really need to promote representation. So we're going to move on to the next piece of this. So I wanted to share what I think is a good example of coming out in media. So Jody's gonna pull up just a very small clip of a TV show, and we're gonna watch and kind of talk about it.
And if you wouldn't mind, Maddie, I'm gonna press play. Just give me a thumbs up that you hear it.
Yeah.
No.
No.
It's just that I've watched you my
Oh wait,
whole life.
okay.
I kind of heard it there.
Is it now you hear it?
Yes.
Cool.
You my whole life.
Oh no.
And you've always been so strong. Done exactly what you believe and never cared about what anyone else thought of you.
Tell me about your life. I know mine.
Abuelita, I love girls the way that I'm supposed to feel about boys. It's just something that's always been inside of me, and I really want to share it with you because I love you so much. I want you to know me, who I really am. When I'm with Brittany, I finally understand what people are talking about when they talk about love. And I've tried so hard to push this feeling away and keep it locked inside, but every day just feels like a war. And I walk around so mad at the world, but I'm really just fighting with myself. I don't want to fight anymore. I'm just too tired. I have to just be me. Say something, please.
We can stop it around there. Just wanted to kind of thank you, Jody. I just wanted to kind of show an example to you all of sort of how representation in media can also offer some language that we may not have ourselves, right? I chose to share this particular clip because that is the scene that made me realize that I was gay. Came out in 2011, so long time ago now. And not only did it really was it the thing that kind of the tipping point for me of like, oh, that's exactly how I feel. But later in my life, when I came out to my mom, this is the scene that I used to help give language to it, right? So that's the other piece of this that I think can be really important. If there are members of the community in this group that feel comfortable and want to put in the chat maybe an important queer representation or show or scene or movie or artist to them that maybe helped them find their identity, please share that in the chat. Or if you can just think of, if anyone just wants to name some positive queer representations in media that you can think of, maybe your favorite, we would love to see them in the chat. But that's mine. All right, we're gonna move on. So how can you promote representation, right? Like, what does that mean? So engaging with queer media is always going to be the best way, right? That means like we want to show people that produce and make art that there's an audience for queer representation. And you can do that on a larger level, but also like there will always be local queer art and media that you can engage with, right? So see local queer musicians, see not local queer musicians, go see LGBT theater. It's everywhere, right? We are always telling queer stories in the theater world. And also seeing local or not so local queer speakers, right? Again, this is where I think your community resources can come in handy, right? Libraries are always inviting speakers from various communities for free to do events. Utilize your public resources. And again, showing up for this representation shows that there's an audience for this representation, right? All right, we can move on. So the final piece of this that I want to kind of get into is what it really means to advocate for LGBTQIA plus rights and policies, right? I think we hear this a lot, but it's hard to understand how to put it into action all the time. So first of all, I think it's really important that we educate ourselves on state and federal policies that could or currently do impact the queer community, right? This is something I'm trying to get much better about. I'm someone that often is like, yes, I'm a vocal ally. I sometimes forget to do my reading. So this, even for me, was a good reminder to go back and learn about what's actually happening in the community now. Attend protests, sign petitions. Anti-LGBTQIA legislation is happening right now in this country, right? Even when it doesn't get passed, it's being brought up over and over and over and over again. So when I think about legislation that passes, legislation that doesn't pass, I think, how many times are we going to have to debate the human rights of this community, right? And so I kind of want to add that. Please still be active in understanding and rallying against anti-LGBTQIA legislation. Speak out at town halls, right? Donate if you can, but if you can't, that's okay, right? Share information, share infographics, direct others, direct your social media feed to people that can donate to organizations that are working to protect these rights on a legislative level or a community level. And then finally, and this is what I'm going to put in the chat, is a link to a guide from the Trevor Project about testifying against any anti-LGBTQIA plus legislation at hearings in your state. So I didn't totally know the steps for this until I was doing some of this research. The Trevor Project is like, Jody and I are obsessed. It's like the most awesome thing in the entire world. And they have this step-by-step guide that I'll link in the chat that teaches you not only how to sign up for hearings in your state, right, for every state, but also like how to prepare when you get there. What are you going to say? How are you going to navigate it? It's massive, it's huge, and it makes it way more accessible, right? As a practice, it seems like something that we couldn't do, but it's something that we can definitely do. And I did just want to read what was in the chat. Yeah. So, what's interesting about that, Jess, I think But I'm a Cheerleader was also a really big, important movie for me. I came out in, well, over time, I mean, I didn't really fully come out until 2020, right? So, 20 years later, that was still important. And I haven't seen Better Than Chocolate, so I'll go on my list. Great, Jody, next slide. So this is just like the major resource we wanted to offer. I know that many people know this, but it's always a good reminder, right? We have the suicide hotline, we have emergency crisis services, but the Trevor Project is for LGBTQIA plus people in crisis. And there are so many ways to talk to them, right? So if you are not a person that feels like you can call a phone number and talk on the phone, you can chat, you can text. They will do everything they can to prevent any self-harm, right? And it's always, you're always with the Trevor Project going to be speaking to a licensed counselor. So these are people trained to navigate mental health crises, particularly in the queer community. So that is all we have. We would love now to, I know that was like information dump, but if anything came up throughout that you'd like to ask us about, or if you want to share more queer movies that you love, so I have a watch list. Selfishly, I would love that. So you can unmute yourself or you can raise your virtual hand.
Yeah, I do have to say, me and my mom are watching Modern Family right now.
Love it.
I mean, I'm rewatching it actually for the second time because I had already watched it the first time with my boyfriend, and I am telling you, we are obsessed with Cam and Mitch. But I think it's just so important because I remember when Modern Family came out, and it's really, I mean, it's interesting because I remember being at church and our priest was like, "There's all these shows." He was like, kind of I shouldn't say mean things, but he's not the pastor anymore. But he had literally mentioned even Modern Family in his sermon and was like, we have these things out here now, like Modern Family. And I was like, I love Modern Family. But that's just like, it's, you know, depending on what community you're in and what, you know, like the views and stuff, it almost felt like, you know, that's not a place to say those things, but that it's just somehow times the way it is. I do just want to real quick, these are our resource pages, so you can obviously access all this after if you wanted to. But then our just thank you. And then what I want to do is just stop sharing my screen just so that if people do have anything they want to say, we can all kind of be in the same little room together.
Any questions, thoughts, expressions of outrage?
I did want to say thank you for starting from the beginning and talking a little bit about language, because I feel like that can be a hang up often for parents and partners and folks who work in mental health who are concerned about getting the verbiage correct and therefore don't have really important conversations because they don't want to say something wrong. So I think it is great to recognize that language is constantly evolving, that you know, you can jump on Google and sort of update yourself or follow some of these sites and update yourself on the language, but also if you get it wrong, that it's okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's all about learning and moving forward. And of course, when it comes to learning, I think it's important to acknowledge, I should have said this at the beginning, like we are also not the authority on all things, right, in this community, and things will change again. And my teens will be like, Miss Maddie, you didn't know that. Right. And it's important to just note this is more from a place of wanting to learn together rather than us like wagging our fingers at people and being like, you should know more, right?
Yeah, I feel like even somebody who's been active in the community for as long as I have, I still every Pride Month wind up looking up a bunch of different flags because I don't know what they mean. You know, like I feel like there's a new 2 or 3 flags that come out every year, and every year I'm like, oh, I have not seen that one before. I need to see what that means.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Pretty much every parade I go to, I then have to be like, all right, let me Google this color combination. I have no idea what that is. And then it's cool to see. It's exciting. Any other thoughts, questions, concerns?
Okay,
Well,
final call for questions. Oh, go ahead,
I
Jody.
was just gonna say, like, like thank you guys all for coming. It was really exciting for me and Maddie to do this together. We actually went to high school together, so full circle. When she started at Backpack, I was like, I know her. So it was really fun to do this with you guys, and thank you guys so much for having us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Maddie and Jody. We really appreciate you coming here today and spending your time and sharing all your valuable information. Thank you to all of our attendees today for joining us. You'll receive a follow-up email with a link to the recording of this presentation, along with a survey asking for your feedback, how we can continually improve these webinars for you. We also want to give a huge thank you to our speakers today and Backpack Healthcare as our superhero level 2024 Children's Mental Health Matters sponsor. Join us for our next Children's Mental Health Matters webinar on July 18th from 11:30 to 12:30, hosted by EveryMind. If you haven't already, believe it or not, it's not too late to become a champion for our 2024 campaign. You can find information on how to join in the chat. We look forward to working together to support the well-being of families and communities across Maryland. If you have any questions, reach out to us. I won't read the email, but it's in the chat. You can also stay connected with Backpack Healthcare by visiting their website at hellobackpack.com or emailing them at intake@hellobackpack.com. So once again, thank you. Maddie and Jody, and thank you to all of you who joined us today.
Thank you.
Everyone.